Bláithín here from astyleofliving.com and welcome to Wedding Wednesday. As a wedding planner, I work with couples from all over the world spending large amounts, small amounts, in-between amounts on their wedding day. And over the course of the last 10 years that I've been planning weddings, I've noticed that there are generally about 10 or so very common items that couples always either forget to include on their budget or don't allot enough money to. So today, as it's Wedding Wednesday, I am going to share with you the ones that I think are most commonly left off a wedding budget. So in no particular order at all. The first one that I find is commonly left off a wedding budget is actually wedding dress fittings and alteration costs. Now this doesn't apply to every boutique or every designer, but often I find a good portion of boutiques or designers obviously have a set price for the wedding dress, but on top of that they charge you for fittings and alterations that are due. And often these can run about €250 per alteration or fitting. And if you need 2 or 3 of those, you're already up on €500 or €750 that you probably haven't included or allocated in your budget. So straight away, almost €1,000 in some cases that you might have to add on additionally. The second thing that I find a lot of couples sort of neglect on their wedding budget is the donation to their church or the cost of their ceremony rental space. Now again, this price ranges depending on obviously where you're having it and the cost of that. But sometimes they can be as little as €150 or as much as $1,000, maybe even more depending on the actual location. So important to, do your research there and investigate what your options are before you make a decision, or at the very least, note down an estimated amount that's realistic for what you're looking for. The third thing I often find couples neglect or forget to include is either the cost of your celebrant or the donation to your celebrant. So separate to the donation to your church, it's always advisable and very much appreciated by your minister or priest that you also give a donation to them for their services. Obviously, if you're having a symbolic or a civil ceremony, then things are probably a little bit more formal and you've been given a cost for their service. So something a little bit more set in stone in that respect. But for donations to a minister or priest, it's best to check perhaps with your parish office or other members of your community to see what the average or norm is acceptable if they haven't been sort of direct in telling you a specific price. The fourth thing that often couples forget to include in their wedding budget are ceremony accessories. So not everybody has these, and the things that couples have often differ greatly, but generally they would include things like your ceremony candles if they're going to be part of the ceremony, your sort of a nice pen to sign your registry or sort of book with, or your marriage license. Other people might include things like confetti if it's permitted at your church or ceremony location, and things like that. So again, just to have a line item or an amount put aside for those things as well. The next thing, the fifth thing that I often find couples forget to include is a contingency fund. And I always suggest that this is a really, really important area to put some money aside with or towards, because ultimately you've probably never planned a wedding before or have very limited knowledge. And at the start of things, you probably aren't really aware of what things actually cost. And there are probably a lot more than the 10 things I'm going to share with you today that you may or may not forget to include in your wedding budget. So by having a contingency fund of somewhere in the region of about 10% of your overall wedding budget allows you to maybe increase your budget in certain areas, or if you have forgotten something, or if you've decided that you would actually like the videographer in the end but had never put sort of money aside for them, contingency funds can be used for those type of things as well. Another really important thing to include in your wedding budget is actually a cost or an amount for wedding insurance. Obviously, nobody ever wants to have to use wedding insurance, but for the sake of, I think they start as low as about €20 and work their way up to about €250, depending on obviously what you want covered, the cost of various things, and where and when, and sort of how you're having your wedding ceremony. You can spend sort of within those ranges. So for the sake of less than a couple of €100, you can protect yourself in the unfortunate circumstances that things don't go to plan, or somebody becomes ill, or God forbid something is lost or stolen on the day or just thereafter as well. The next thing that couples nearly always forget are wedding supplier meal costs for the day of your wedding. So there's always a number of wedding suppliers who are with you the entire wedding day. And they often include people like your wedding planner, your photographer, your videographer, potentially your hair and makeup people. So they're with you from early morning until late at night. And it's always a very good idea to feed them, at least to give them some sort of lunch or dinner at some point during the day. Often it's an excellent time to do it, obviously, while you and the rest of your guests are eating. I never, ever, ever suggest to my couples or to any couple to feed your wedding supplier at your reception, as a guest. It's much more acceptable and probably much more appreciated by them to feed them sort of in another room or at the bar. They're not guests at your wedding, and remember, this is, for all intents and purposes, a work day for them as well. So having sort of a small amount of downtime where they can just sit down and relax and recharge their own batteries is very much appreciated, while they get the opportunity to eat as well. The next thing that couples often forget is their invitation postage. So, and this can be a big amount of money in your wedding budget if you haven't sort of included it in there. So you could be looking at a couple of €100 depending on where you and your wedding guests are located and how many invitations that you're sending out. So really important to factor that into your wedding budget as well. And the next thing, which will surprise some people, but often couples forget that there is actually a cost involved in your marriage license or registering your marriage. Depending on where you live, the process is a little bit different and the costs are very different as well. Here in Ireland, the current cost to register a marriage is €200. And then obviously your celebrant or your ceremony or whatever else you're having is on top of that. So again, if you forget to include that €200 in your wedding budget, for some couples it can be a significant amount. And finally, the line item or thing that I often forget, or not that I forget, that couples often forget to include in their wedding budget are supplier tips. Now obviously I appreciate not every couple is going to want to give tips to their wedding suppliers, or indeed to every single wedding supplier. But for those who greatly impressed you or went above and beyond, it is a really nice way of thanking them for their work and a job well done. Now, potentially you might not want to actually give them money to do this. Maybe it's a small gift or some other token of appreciation. But again, just to ensure that you've actually included an amount in your wedding budget for that, so that you don't have any surprises at the end. So you can see there over those 10 items, depending on your specific circumstances, this could add a few €100 or a few €1,000 to your wedding budget, which nobody wants sort of to unexpectedly see all of those costs add up while they're planning their wedding. So really important to make sure that you've done your research correctly and really had to think about absolutely everything that you're going to have to spend money on while you're planning your wedding. So I hope you enjoyed these quick tips that I've shared with you today on Wedding Wednesday. Please do give it a thumbs up if you like the video, and if you are interested in more wedding planning services, as many of you know, I am a full-time wedding planner and my company is theweddingexpert.ie, so you can check me out there if you want to talk more about that. In the meantime though, next week here on A Style of Living is Tidy Thursday, and next Thursday I'm going to be sharing with you some great tips that, specifically around organising a very small wardrobe. And that's Tilly shaking off in the corner there, if you can hear her. But anyway, thanks so much for watching, guys. Please do subscribe if this is your first time stopping by, and I look forward to sharing more with you next week. Thanks again.